Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something I think we're all kind of dealing with on a daily basis,
hmm
um, and that is that massive presence of social media in our lives. And, we all know how it connects us and lets us share and stay informed, but
Yeah, I mean, the early days of social media really did have this kind of utopian ideal around it, right? Like really democratizing communication, allowing us to stay close to people regardless of distance and build communities online,
yeah.
really fundamentally changing how we interact.
But, we've all kind of felt that nagging feeling that there's a bit more to it than that. Like, there's this subtle influence, these platforms kind of grabbing our attention, maybe shifting our perspectives without us even really realizing it's happening.
Yeah, and that's really what we want to uncover in this deep dive. Like, how exactly does social media achieve this? What are the mechanisms at play? And most importantly, what can you, the listener, actually do to gain a bit more awareness and control over those digital experiences?
Exactly. And to help unpack all of this, we've been taking a look at this article that really gets into that initial appeal of these platforms and then explores some of the less obvious ways they can end up impacting us. So, I guess to kick things off, what was it about social media that really drew us all in the first place?
Well, I think at its core, it really tapped into some very basic human desires. That instant connectivity was huge. Suddenly, you could effortlessly stay in touch with friends and family no matter where they were, reconnect with people from your past, feel like you were part of this larger collective. And I think, we look back throughout history, social connection has been absolutely crucial for our survival. Our brains are actually wired to seek it out.
Right. And I remember that feeling of community being so strong. Like finding these groups of people who shared your interests, your hobbies, even some of those kind of quirky opinions, and feeling like you finally found your people.
Absolutely. And on top of that, you had the sheer entertainment value. This constant stream of videos, photos, news updates, all readily available right there in your pocket. And it really played into that very human need for not just connection, but also that social validation. You get those likes, you get those comments. It's that little hit of positive reinforcement.
It really is. And, before we knew it, checking our social feeds became this automatic thing, just kind of woven into the fabric of our day. Like first thing in the morning on the commute, waiting in line, those little moments just kind of naturally got filled with scrolling.
And I think what's really interesting here is how these platforms kind of evolved from simply meeting this existing need to actually shaping our behavior. And to really understand that shift, I think we need to look at the science behind why we keep coming back for more.
Okay, so let's get into that. What is it biologically that's making it so hard to put those phones down?
Well, a big part of it has to do with this neurochemical called dopamine. You can think of it as the brain's reward signal. So when something good or unexpected happens, you get a notification, someone likes your post, you get a positive comment. Particularly if it's unpredictable, our brains release a little bit of dopamine. And that creates this sort of pleasure reward loop. Our brains start associating that act of checking social media with that positive feeling, making us want to do it again and again.
So it's like our brain is giving us this little pat on the back every time someone interacts with us online.
Exactly. And it's not even just those rewards that we can kind of anticipate. One of the things that makes social media particularly habit forming is what we call variable rewards. It's kind of like, think of it like a slot machine. You're not always sure when you're going to get that positive feedback, that engaging comment, that share, that funny reaction. And that unpredictability actually makes the behavior even more compulsive. You're constantly kind of checking, scrolling in anticipation of that potential reward.
Right, so it's that anticipation, that little spark of hope that there's something interesting or validating waiting for us that keeps us hooked. Okay, so we've got this dopamine system at play. What about these algorithms that we always hear so much about? What are they actually doing behind the scenes?
Well, essentially, these algorithms are designed to keep you engaged on that platform for as long as possible. And they do this by analyzing just mountains of data about your online activity, what you click on, how you react, who you interact with, how long you look at certain things. And based on all that information, they kind of curate your feed, aiming to show you content they think you'll find the most interesting, the most engaging.
So it's not just a straight chronological feed of everything everyone's posting anymore.
Not really, no. It's become a very personalized stream of content that's kind of tailored to what the algorithm thinks you'll like. And one of the side effects of that is the creation of what we call echo chambers.
Right, so you mostly see information that just reinforces what you already believe. Yeah.
Exactly. And because that algorithm is always trying to show you what it thinks aligns with your interests, it can kind of accidentally filter out diverse perspectives, different viewpoints that might challenge you. And this just keeps strengthening existing biases and making it tougher to see different sides of an issue.
Yeah, and if you connect this to the bigger picture, it really starts to impact how we understand the world around us.
Exactly.
And it's not just about reinforcing beliefs either, right?
Yeah.
It seems like these algorithms kind of push more sensational or emotionally charged content our way.
Yeah, you're right. Because things that trigger strong emotions, whether it's joy or anger, surprise, even outrage, those tend to get shared more, get more interactions. And algorithms, they pick up on that, they recognize that heightened engagement, and they often prioritize that type of content because it's more effective at grabbing our attention. But the problem is, sometimes more nuanced or less emotionally charged stuff gets kind of buried.
Right, so it can feel like we're always just seeing the most extreme ends of every spectrum. And all of this engagement, all of these little nudges, it can't be entirely neutral for our mental well-being.
Yeah, unfortunately, the research does suggest a link between excessive social media use and some negative psychological outcomes. Studies have shown, correlations with increased anxiety, depression, particularly among younger people.
And that's really concerning. What are some of the ways that connection might be happening?
Well, I think a big one is this phenomenon of social comparison. We're constantly being shown these carefully curated highlights of other people's lives, picture perfect vacations, exciting achievements, flawless appearances. And even when we know, intellectually, that this isn't the whole picture, it's hard not to compare ourselves and feel inadequate, maybe experience lower self-esteem or even loneliness. It's that constant measuring yourself against this oftentimes unrealistic ideal.
Totally. And then you have the impact on our sleep. That blue light from our devices interferes with our melatonin production, making it harder to fall asleep. And then you have the habit of scrolling late at night, cutting into our sleep time, which then impacts our mood, our energy levels, our overall well-being. And it becomes this cycle, right? Feeling down or anxious can lead to more late-night scrolling, which then makes it even worse.
It's a tough cycle to break for sure. And, we tend to think that we're in complete control of our social media use. We choose when to open the app, how long to scroll, what to look at. But is that really always the case?
It doesn't always feel like it, that's for sure.
Right. And I think often that feeling of complete control is kind of an illusion. It's created by how these platforms are designed. They use these subtle little features that actually make it really difficult to disengage. Think about infinite scrolling. There's no natural break point. The content just keeps loading, pulling you further and further in.
Oh yeah, you can easily get sucked into just mindlessly scrolling for who knows how long without even realizing it.
Exactly. And then you have things like autoplay on videos. One ends, the next one starts right up. There's no moment for you to consciously decide, do I want to keep watching? So all of these design elements essentially remove those little pauses that would allow us to kind of step back and reassess if we actually want to continue.
So we're kind of being subtly guided to keep going even when we might actually want to stop. And all this activity, all the time we spend online, is generating a huge amount of data, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Every comment, every search, everything you post, everything you linger on, all of that is a data point that's being constantly collected and analyzed. And these platforms use this just immense amount of information to build these incredibly detailed profiles of our preferences, our behaviors, even our vulnerabilities.
Now, so what's the main purpose of all this data collection? What's it all for?
Well, at the end of the day, it's about money. It's about generating revenue through targeted advertising. By understanding who we are and what we like on such a granular level, these platforms can serve us really specific ads. And, sometimes it can feel convenient, but it also raises some big questions about our privacy, about how ethical it is to use our information this way.
It definitely feels like there's an exchange happening, but you're right, the terms of that exchange aren't always super clear. Okay, so we've talked about some of the downsides, but I guess the good news is we're not completely powerless, right? There are things we can do to take back some control.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the first and most important step is just awareness. Simply recognizing how these platforms are designed to influence us, that in itself can be incredibly empowering. And from there are definitely some concrete things you can start doing. Setting time limits for your social media use, either through your phone's built-in features or maybe a third-party app, is a really effective way to make your usage more intentional.
So it's about creating those healthy boundaries.
Exactly. Another really powerful one is disabling those non-essential notifications. Those constant pings and buzzes, they create this urgency, this urge to check your phone right away. By turning them off, you take back control. You decide when you want to engage instead of constantly being interrupted. And people who've done this have said they feel significantly less stressed.
Yeah, I've tried that before, and it really does make a difference. You feel so much calmer and more focused.
Oh, it's amazing. Now, another big one is curating your social media feed. Unfollow accounts that consistently leave you feeling negative, anxious, inadequate. Instead, actively seek out accounts and content that inspire you, educate you, genuinely bring you joy. You have the power to kind of shape that digital environment for yourself.
It's about being more mindful about what we're consuming.
Exactly. And before you post something or react to something online, just take a second, pause, think about your intention, think about the potential impact. That mindful engagement can really help prevent those impulsive actions and contribute to a more positive online space overall. And finally, don't underestimate the power of a good old-fashioned digital detox. Intentionally schedule some time away from social media, reconnect with the offline world, with your hobbies, with the people around you in a more present way.
Sounds like a great way to reset. Now all of these individual actions are important, but is there also a need for some bigger systemic changes as well?
Definitely. While we all have that individual responsibility, there's a growing recognition that we need broader regulations that can really create a healthier digital environment for everyone. And that might look like pushing for greater transparency around how these algorithms work, stronger protections for our data, even exploring ways to address those inherently addictive design elements that we talked about.
So it's about both personal responsibility and holding these platforms accountable.
Exactly. And I think if we zoom out and look at the big picture here, creating that more ethical, more user-centric digital world requires both. It requires us as individuals to be more aware and to change our habits, and it requires those wider systemic shifts.
It sounds like social media really is this double-edged sword then. It offers incredible connection, access to information, but it also has this potential to subtly influence and control us in ways we might not always realize.
I think that's a great way to put it. And the takeaway here is that by understanding how these things work, the dopamine loops, the algorithms, the design, and by choosing to adopt these more mindful habits, you can really harness the benefits of social media without falling prey to the potential downsides.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider as you go about your day. Think about which features or design elements, maybe it's the endless scrolling, the notifications, something else entirely, which ones have the strongest pull on you. And based on everything we've talked about today, what's one small adjustment you can make to your habits this week to take back a little bit of that control? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.